Variables are what allow us to store and retrieve data in our programs. They're very easy to use, but there are some very specific rules that we need to use in our JavaScript programs. In the upcoming videos, we'll learn how to use variables in JavaScript. Setting variables is easy to do in JavaScript. Since JavaScript is dynamically typed, when we create a variable, all we have to do is give it a name and any value. In other languages that are instead statically typed, each variable must have a specific type associated with it. For instance, a variable could be just a number, just a string, or just some other type. But we don't have to worry about giving a type to a variable in JavaScript. We can create a variable and assign its value to a number, and then later to a string. It doesn't really matter, variables can hold any type at any time. Right here, I have a basic HTML page and JavaScript set up. In the HTML page, I have just some basic HTML, and I include my script with this script tag. The myscript.js right now is empty except for a simple comment here, but this is where we'll be experimenting with variables. So let's dive in. In Intro to Programming, we saw how to set variables like this. var color equals red. This statement is made out of 4 parts. The first is the var keyword. This says that we're declaring a variable. Right after the var keyword is the name of our variable. Now this can be almost any type of word. We'll see the rules for the names of our variables a little bit later. Then we have the equal sign, which says we're initializing a value or setting an initial value. Finally, we have the value we're going to set to the variable. This can be any type, like a string, a number, an array, or it can be an expression like a mathematical expression, the concatenation of strings, or the result of a function call, or really any other expression. Now we've sort of taken a look at what variables can be used for in Intro to Programming, but let me give you a concrete example of where we might want to use a variable when we're programming JavaScript in the browser. In my index.html page, I have a div with the ID of myDiv. Now using JavaScript and some built-in functions in the browser, we can manipulate things like its color and its background color. So let's take a look at how we might do that with JavaScript. So if I use this expression right here, this will take the element with the ID of myDiv and set its background color to black. Now the specifics of the methods and functions called here are not important and not what we're going to focus on, but I'll give you a little overview. Document is a variable that's built into our web page. It's always available, and it represents our page. On that, we call a method called getElementById, and what this will do is return the div with the ID of myDiv. Then on myDiv, there's an object named style with a property background, and we can either read from that to get the current background color of that element, or we can set to it to set its color. So if I save this out, and we take a look at our page, this is the div that we are focusing on. If we refresh the page, we'll see that nothing happens, and that's because the way our script is included right now, it's run before our page is set up. Now the easiest way to fix this is to take the script tag and put it at the end of our body. This means by the time our script tag is included into the page, our div, for instance, has already been put into the page and is accessible, whereas before it was not. There are other methods we could employ to fix this problem, but this one's good because it lets the entire page load in before we do any JavaScript interaction, which allows our page to load a little bit faster. So now if we refresh the page, we should see our div now has the background color black. Now that's alright, but if we go to myscript.js, and let's say for instance we want to change the text color to white, well what could we do? We could do a similar line, and instead of setting style.background, we could do style.color, which in this case is how we set the CSS text color of a div. Now if we did this, this would work. And we can see now our text color is white. But this isn't a very good way to code. We have a lot of repeated code here. For instance, we get the element by ID twice, even though it's the same element. Instead, we could use a variable, and we'll call it myDiv. We're giving it a descriptive name. In this case, we're giving it the name of the ID that's already associated with the div, but it doesn't have to be the same. For instance, I could say my container, or anything else. But to be clear, I'll do my div. Now I can use the equal sign to assign a value. And the value that I want to assign is the actual div. Now in this expression, the div is represented by all of this right here. Document.getElementById, passing it my div. This evaluates to the div that we actually want. So I can take that out, and now our myDiv variable contains that div, and we can use it over and over again. So instead of using the document.getElementById over and over again, we can instead use the variable that we set, for instance, myDiv. And we can do it again here. So anytime we want to get or set something on myDiv, we simply use the value stored in the myDiv variable. This allows us to easily change our code, for instance, if we change the actual ID of the element that we want to use. Instead, now we would only have to change this in one place, right here where we set the variable, and myDiv in the rest of the code would reflect that change. So let's save this out and see if it works. If we refresh, we can see the same behavior is taking place. The div now has a black background with white text. Now you should have a very basic understanding of how variables work in JavaScript. In the next video, we'll see the rules that JavaScript has for our variable names.